Well, I'm a biologist, but I work at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health for the Division of Mental Health. I'm a scientist, and then my work kind of consists of trying to figure out how to give people better mental health and how to make them happy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very nice job. I can pretty much do what I want, but mostly I write articles and write books about those issues about mental health and happiness.
I think that's one thing that everybody's looking for, is the search for happiness.
I'm not sure, because well, evolution designed humans with a capacity for happiness and also for bad feelings, but that was not the point of evolution. Is not to make us happy. It just happens to be a strategy that would improve the chance of survival and procreation. So we're not designed to be happy per se, but and that also means that people not necessarily are moved towards happiness. They may more likely be moved toward other aspects of life, like status or like money, and it takes a bit of conscious effort to instead of going where the genes kind of point you to go for happiness instead.
So what does that mean, going for happiness instead?
It means you can focus on that in your life if you want to, but then that's not the natural default setting that you should go for happiness. I mean, that's not what the genes designed you for. So you have to kind of take an effort to move towards happiness instead of just kind of following your other emotions. I mean, you can easily trigger anger, you can easily trigger all sorts of emotions because they're put there for a purpose by evolution. And they are more easily triggered than perhaps the happiness part. But then on the other hand, evolution did shape, I think, all mammals with not just a capacity for happiness, but also with a default setting of contentment or happiness, meaning it's in the gene's interest to reside within a body that has a positive and optimistic viewpoint, meaning that if everything is fine, if you do not have any specific pains or problems and are healthy, then you should be happy, you should be content. And I think the problem in present society is that so many people have troubles with the other aspects of the human mind, with the aspects causing pain or causing sorrow, and they are taking over, they're destroying this natural default setting of contentment.
So the question is, can we really think ourselves happy?
Oh, the human brain is very plastic. That's the nice thing about it. So yes, you can maybe not just, well, you can exercise your brain, you can exercise the various modules that are put in the brain, and so I'd rather talk about having the capacity to exercise. Like you can, the brain basically has two kind of modules that gives you the good or bad feelings. It's the rewards and punishments part of the brain. And it's there for a very obvious purpose, because the whole point of having a brain is to move your behavior either towards what is good for the genes or away from what is bad for the genes, and toward food and away from predators or toxins. So the brain comes to this dichotomy of either good or bad, and that is reflected in that we can feel good or bad. And you can exercise the reward part of the brain by just thinking I'm happy, or by just putting on a smile. That's one experiment where you put a pencil in between either the lips or the teeth, and if you put it between the teeth, you force the mouth into a smile. Unconsciously, you don't know you're smiling, but you force the smiling muscles to form a smile. And that seems to be sufficient to have an impact on the brain, because just the smiling muscles being activated send signals back to the brain saying you are happy now. So that improves your mood. So that way you can, in various ways, try to exercise your good mood part of the brain, and then that will bring the balance toward more happiness or a better mood.
And so many people are told by their doctors that you have low serotonin, it's a chemical imbalance, that's why you're depressed or you're feeling unhappy. Can we change that? Can we change those neurotransmitter chemicals?
Oh yeah, we obviously can, but that's a difficult thing to do. I mean, that's what therapeutics medicine are about, or like the serotonin reuptake inhibitors. or anything going on in anything going on in the mind or your feelings does have a neurological correlate in the brain, and you can impact on that with various chemicals. The problem is that these chemicals, like serotonin, is active in a large part of the brain, and if you start messing with that, it's very difficult to hit the right spot and to only change the activity in those neurons that you want to change. So it's a possible strategy, but the medicine they have so far is not working very well. There are new medicines coming that might be better actually for it, like depression, like ketamine, and but it's also possible to find methods to exercise the brain, or to mental exercises that can have I think at least as much impact as the medicine, and a lot safer impact.
Can you tell me a little bit about these exercises or methods? Is there anything people can do?
Yes, in my mind, the main problem with present society is that we tend to, from early on in life, we tend to exercise some of the punishment feelings in the brain, primarily those associated with fear and low mood, which means people have problems with anxiety and depression. That's because these modules of the mind has been exercised from early on, and they take over. They're too dominant in the brain, and due to the way of life we have today, due to the fact that the way of life we have is not what the genes are expected. Babies are not carried anymore. They're put in the stroller and so on, and you exercise the fear function in the babies, and that's. So as adults, I mean, what matters is one part is the genes, which makes it like a part of how easy you'll find happiness or not. The other part is your early upbringing and also your present environment. And the third thing you can do though is to exercise. And I think if you could manage to turn off these negative feelings like anxiety, depression, primarily, then you would get back to what is default contentment position. And that is possible you can do meditative exercises, and while in a meditative state you can try to use sentences like turn off anxiety, or I have no anxiety, and try to get into that feeling that anxiety is going away from your brain. And that's a way to exercise kind of this turn off buttons of the negative feelings, but because any kind of brain module or brain function will have a turn on button in the way that it's activated at a certain stimuli, but it will also have a turn off button because it's in the interest of the genes of the brain to be stopped when it's no longer useful. So when you if you have some a fear signal, you see a snake, you get afraid. But when you realize what you thought was a snake was just a stick on the ground, the fear function should be turned off again. And one problem, I think, is that we exercise the turn on fear function, but not the turn off fear function. And therefore, that anxiety feeling keeps coming back or keeps occupying the mind. But you can try to exercise the turn off fear button. And psychologists do that with they treat phobias. They would try to teach you how to turn off the fear function by showing you, if you have a phobia for spiders, they'll first show you a picture of a small spider and you ask you to try to not get afraid of that, and then you move on to bigger picture or bigger spiders, and you gradually learn to turn off the fear function. And it's easy with phobias. It's more difficult with a general anxiety. It's possible there too to kind of, in a meditative state, imagine yourself to turn off or get rid of all the fear. And I think it works. I think that's possible.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that, especially with anxiety, find it difficult to meditate because, getting them into that meditative state when they're already very anxious or suffering, for instance, from compulsive or obsessive thinking. Any strategies there that can help to be able to almost get them into that turn-off state before they can move into a meditative state?
I think it's a big problem because it's easier to help people with minor issues than those with seriously problems with anxiety or depression. It's harder to get out of, and for them it might maybe I could see why they might be helped, or some might be helped by taking more traditional medicines to kind of at least move a little bit away from the deeper depression, deeper anxiety, and then being more in a position to work with themselves. I do think though that just taking the medicine without trying to work with yourself, without trying to exercise the brain, is not a good option, because the medicine is unlikely to be a good long-term strategy. It tends to have by effects you don't want. So it can offer a kind of an opening for giving you the extra energy to work on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Are there exercises that you do every day to keep yourself happy?
Well, I meditate, not every day, but I've been meditating for like 45 years, but not very regularly, up and down. And I try to use these exercises. Yeah, I use exercise. I meditate using sentences or using like phrases that I try to move into, either on, it could be on compassion, trying to say that I hope everything is going well with this person or this person. And
so directing your energy outwards towards others rather than
not really.
Always inwardly focused? Or?
It's directing energy inwards. It's my kind of, I induce the sense of compassion in my mind, and the most important part for being happy, most psychologists and we as biologists would say, is the relationship you have with other people, because it's a very important part of being human, and which means that when you have good relationships, there's lots of reward systems that are activated. If you have bad relationship with other people, lots of punishment systems are activated. So what sort of relationships you have is very important for your measure of happiness. And you can induce that in the brain. If you feel compassion, it makes you happy. And of course the side effect is that you might be a more likable person and other people will like you, and that again makes you even more happy. It's a
feedback.
A good positive feedback circle, that if you create a kind of yourself are a person that you like other people, people will like you, and you both get happy. And that can be exercised too. Compassion can be trained in the brain during meditation. The Tibetan form of tradition is very focused on that. But basically it's that it makes, even without other people present, just feeling the compassion makes you happy as well, because it's triggering reward systems in the brain.
I think that's quite a different approach, because certainly kind of modern society works more, is moving more towards, trying to find things that make yourself happy, but focusing very much on the self. You're saying by focusing on compassion for others, you can actually bring more happiness for yourself.
Yeah, it's a selfish thing, but it does help society and your environment or your other people. So it's and the nice thing is that it works for everybody. So it's definitely, if you want to create a good society, that's kind of what you might want to move toward, to kind of have people. Meditating for compassion makes a lot of sense, but you can meditate on other things. And again, if your trouble is related to anxiety, you might also want to try to meditate on turning off that emotion, and because otherwise you need that to be able to have the kind of energy, or to have the position to move on to other sorts of meditation as well.
So we do perhaps have a lot more control over our emotions than we think.
Oh, yes and no. The conscious brain is just like small ripples on the ocean, so what's going on inside the brain. The consciousness is only the brain. The unconscious brain serves you small bits or pieces that are that's been purposefully made for your consciousness. So the emotion starts in the unconscious, and they pop up in your brain. So you cannot turn them off like with a switch someplace in your brain. You have to kind of find ways of impacting on the unconscious brain, which is possible, but it's not that easy. So the unconscious brain is having a very large impact on what you do feel, and getting around that. This is the genes talking to you. It's the way your brain evolution shaped your brain. So you have to kind of find your means of finding strategies to to impact on the unconscious part in order to then have that again have an impact on your conscious experiences.
Mm-hmm. And how do you do that?
Meditation is one way of doing it, because there's a connection. If you say to yourself, like, I am happy, or try to just experiencing that happiness, or say to yourself, I have no worries, then eventually that will have a small impact every time you do it. And if you do it regularly, it's like exercising a muscle. If you do it regularly, you'll go with larger biceps. And if you do it regularly, you can also exercise these brain modules and impact on them. Because the brain was shaped by evolution to be plastic, it was shaped to be kind of formed by environmental input, and you can make that environmental input yourself inside your brain. So it's possible. It's not, but it's a lot easier to exercise muscles than to exercise like the emotions in the brain.
Mm-hmm.